Okay, let's see what we have here. First statement, you're wrong. Okay, if I'm having a conversation with someone, and I don't think what they're saying is correct, instead of saying you're wrong, how could I sort of reframe that? Maybe using an I statement to try to say to that person that I don't think they're correct. Okay, what would I say instead of you're wrong? What happens to you? What happens to you, Lynn, if I say you're wrong?
Well,
I just say it like
generally
that.
folks get defensive.
Absolutely. Talk about the defensive guy, Nadine. That's in there. There you go. Because you say something like that, and people's normal reaction is to get defensive, get into that defensive crowd. So how would I say that to someone in another, saying it a different way?
I think you
Reframe.
might be mistaken.
Okay.
Well, and I believe that the facts in this case may state.
Okay, yeah, because what we want to try to do is kind of bring it from them to you, and so what you may say is, I've come up with a different conclusion, or I've come up with a different answer than that. Maybe we need to look and see what the information is telling us. So, in other words, I'm saying you're wrong, but I'm not saying it that way. I'm saying I've come up with something different. Let's talk about why your answer or your conclusion is different from what I came up with. Okay? How about the next one? That's not true.
Well, in my particular work area, I have to work very diligently at the conversation not being you against me.
Sure.
But you and I are on board and we have to fight the system. So.
Sort of, it's us against the big guys. Sure.
Yeah. Rather than it really being I, but for that's not true, which I've encountered a number of times. I've got, after reviewing your file, it says this. So, rather than me going, I know you're lying, because I can read the content here,
but that's absolutely true.
Refer to the documentation.
My information, the information that I have doesn't jive with what you're saying here, that's a lot more pleasant way to have a conversation than saying, that's not true.
Well, it's more pleasant
or
for
you're
me,
a liar.
But it tends to
It's
be
more pleasant.
uncomfortable for them.
Well, but it can be more pleasant to them too, and not pleasant maybe, but it's reframing it in a way that, again, they don't get defensive by you saying, you know what, you're a liar, or that's not true. It's, my information is different from what you're saying. Let's kind of look at that. So it's a way of getting it back into that. You can either say it's an I statement, or you could say, I'm trying to reframe it. How about the one that says, stop interrupting me? What could I say instead? Someone comes into my office and I'm busy, and I'm trying to get a report out that's due, and instead of saying stop interrupting me, what could I say to that person that says the same thing? What can I say instead of stop interrupting me?
Actually, I was thinking about it on more of somebody's yada, 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 yada. And you need them to-
Okay, well, all right. How do you do that?
Just something like, at this juncture, I just need for you to listen.
Okay,
And, and then from there.
okay, yeah,
And then
yeah.
after I've held my ground, I'll let you talk. Okay?
Yeah, or I really want to hear and understand what you have to say, but give me a minute to explain this. Or if they come into your office, I really want to talk to you, give me about 10 minutes, I'll give you a call, we'll set up a meeting, or we'll set up a place to have a conversation. So the throwing to them that I really am concerned about what you're saying, because I know what you're saying is important. Well, all of a sudden now that person says, wow, that she thinks I'm important, or he thinks I'm really important, or what I have to say is really important. So it really kind of puts the onus back on them in terms of their understanding. So I'm saying to them, I really am interested in what you're saying, but I just can't talk to you right now, or please let me finish, and then I want to understand what you're saying to me. So something like that is kind of reframing that situation. How about you don't know what you're talking about? And this kind of goes back into that same thing about you're wrong or whatever. You don't know what you're talking about. How could I say that?
It's your turn,
I'm putting you on the
John's
spot.
writing, John's taking what, how could I say that? You don't know what you're talking about. Reframing it in a way that would be more, that person would be more receptive to that. Because again, if they come in and say something and you say, John, you just don't know what you're talking about. John is immediately going to get in what we call a defensive crouch, ready to go to battle, okay? But what if I say to John, John, the documents or the documentation or the information I have just doesn't line up with what you're saying. Let's talk about it and see where there's a disconnect. John is going to be much more receptive to that than he is to if I just tell him, John, this is you don't know what you're talking about. If I tell him, John, my information, it's back to that I thing, isn't it? Reframing. My information just doesn't correlate with the information or the conclusions that you're coming up with. And I want it to work. We're both on the same team, going back to that kind of we versus them stuff. And I think that's a great idea. It's a great concept. Because you sort of, and you see athletic teams do the same thing. They sort of say, it's us against the world. All these coaches and everything, they always play these big things about, nobody in the media, nobody in the press thinks you're any good. So it's us against the whole world, And it's kind of that same concept. I'm telling John, look, I want us to be on the same team, So I'm telling him, he doesn't know what he's talking about, but I'm telling him in a way that, we're on the same team. My information doesn't jive. Let's see why.
Well, and what I try to encourage them to understand is that the VA has regulations just like the military has regulations. Sure. And I am bound by law to do yada, yada, yada. And so what I try to do is get them on board, the veteran and I are a team, and we've got to deal with these, this regulation or overcome this obstacle or. Yeah,
we're having to work within certain parameters. And there's no wiggle room on some of that stuff. It has to be done a certain way. And so, sure, that's absolutely right. But these are ways and techniques to be able to say to folks something that might be a little bit negative, but we're sort of using those I statements or reframing in a way that says exactly the same thing, but it says it in a way that we don't really make a disconnect with that person. Okay? Questions on that? Okay, let's talk a little bit now about body language. Let's talk about body language. And this is something that, people talk about. I think there's a lot of misconceptions